Hi, I'm Neil Beck, and I was a Perth doctor for 53 years and had 500,000 consultations, home and hospital visits, helped 800 babies into the world, did a lot of tonsillectomies and appendicectomies and vasectomies, and looked after a lot of people with injuries and infections and diseases. The most important thing I learnt is that what's most important in life is to be mentally healthy. The 7 most important things in life are mental health, good relationships, high endorphins chemistry, which boosts your immune system, a strong immune system, a good home in a good district, a good education and a good job. But there's never been any perfect mums, dads, families, communities or schools or districts. So we all started our life with some suffering that caused some mental problems, and mental problems cause other problems. So one of the most important things is, as early as possible, to try to find what mental health problems you have got, to understand them, what caused them, and get them fixed. But the problem was nobody got all the help that they needed. A lot of people got no help, and as far as I could see, almost no one got enough help. And what was the problem? The problem was that the tools that mental health care professionals used were weak, had big weaknesses. There were 2 tools. The first was consultations or counselling or therapy, and it had 2 problems. The first is that it was very slow. It took an hour to assess a new patient, to find out what their problems were, what probably caused them, what was aggravating them, and what might help to make them better. And usually you needed to see them preferably for an hour every week, and we just didn't have time to do that. The other weakness of consultations or therapy was it cost too much. To become a therapist, you had to have at least a 4-year Bachelor of Psychology, but preferably a Master's or PhD in psychology. And to be a psychiatrist took 10 to 12 years. So those people had to be pretty smart. They had to do a long training course, and they needed to be paid well. And because consultations were slow, they were too expensive. The other tool was medicines. And medicines had a few problems. The biggest problem was the conflict of interest between the troubled people who needed to take medicines and the people who make medicines. The troubled people wanted to take medicine, get better quickly, and then stop the medicine. But the people who make medicine wanted to sell as much medicine as possible at as high a price as possible. So they made many medicines addictive. The commonest mental health problem was worry, anxiety, various forms of worry, anxiety. And all the medicines for worry, anxiety are addictive. It used to be the barbiturates. There were many different barbiturates and they were all addictive. And then it was the benzodiazepines, Valium, Seropax, Mogadon, and so on, all addictive. And then there was Ambien and Silnox, very addictive. I still remember one elderly man referred to me because he was taking 17 Silnox a day. And I remember a family, a mother, a grandmother and a grandson living together who between them took about 30 Silnox tablets a day. And a few years ago I did a search on the 100 most prescribed medicines in America. Every year in America they put out a list of the 100 most prescribed medicines, and Ambien was the most prescribed medicine for the 3 years that I checked. Not because it's very good, but because it's addictive. The conflict of interest, the makers of medicines make many addictive. They don't make any that work too fast and get you better quickly. Sadly, antidepressants take between 1 and 5 weeks to start working. And medicines that you swallow take half an hour to an hour to go right down in your gut and start to get into your bloodstream and start to get where you need them, and between 1 and 2 hours before they're working strongly, which is just too slow. So mental health is the most important thing in our lives, and nobody and it was common we used to have the idea that only a few people had mental health problems. I now believe that everyone has mental health problems. Some people not very bad, but because there are no perfect mums, no perfect dads, no perfect families, communities, or schools, everybody has some suffering, and suffering is what causes most mental health problems. So how are we going to overcome this problem? Not enough mental health care professionals and problems with consultations and problems with medicines. I came to the conclusion eventually that people had to be helped to help themselves. The only way that people were going to get help early enough was to have tools that they could help themselves with, tools that would help them find what their problems were, understand the causes, understand the nature of the problems, and know what to do to make the problems better. They still needed mental health care professionals, but they had to do a lot of the work themselves, and they needed good tools. So over the last 22 years I've been developing a pack of 10 self-help mental health tools, which you can find at my website, which is smilefixit.com. smilefixit.com. The tools were under a minute videos, websites, the Mental Fixit app, live streaming, powder medicines, which you suck and which you absorb through your tongue, which start to work in 5 minutes and work strongly in 5 to 15 minutes. And pocket powder medicine dispensers that you can carry your powder medicine with in your pocket, so anytime, anywhere, you can whiz it out and in seconds drop some on your tongue, suck it, and nip problems in the bud. As soon as the problem starts, you take the right powder medicine and absorb it very quickly, and that has two benefits. First of all, it greatly reduces your suffering, whatever that is, and secondly, mental health problems are basically bad habits, and you can break the habit or you can weaken the habit and sometimes break it by nipping it in the bud every time as soon as it starts, block it. And there's underlying triggers and electrical and chemical drivers weaken and may even stop in some cases. So that's 6 tools. The 7th tool is heartbeat meditation aid. Meditation is very, very valuable for people with mental health problems, but the people who would most need meditation often can't learn to do it because they teach you to focus on your breathing, which allows you to stop thinking about your problems, but focusing on your breathing or on a word which you keep repeating is not a strong enough diversion to let you stop being troubled by your problems in many of the worst cases. But your heartbeat sounds are loud and strong and clear and very interesting. So I just cut stethoscope short and you plug it in. That's the hearing part. You just put that over your heart and you listen to your heart, and that's a strong, loud, interesting sound which is fairly easy to focus on, which allows you to stop thinking about your problems. And you can learn to meditate in a month or two of doing that. And once you've started to develop a habit, then you can often meditate by focusing on your breathing, and in the end that's the best. Our brain chemistry is strongly influenced by a few things, but one of them is our facial expressions. When we smile or laugh, that boosts our happy brain chemistry. And when we breathe slowly, steadily, that calms and boosts our brain chemistry. And we can control our facial expressions and we can control our breathing, so that means we can control our brain chemistry. We produce about 25 happy, healthy brain chemistry chemicals. There's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, noradrenaline, and over 20 endogenous morphines called endorphins. And those 25 chemicals are what makes us happy, and they also make us healthy because they manage our immune system keep our immune system strong, and our immune system fights infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. Yeah, so that's tool number 7. Tool number 8 is another powder dispenser. It's a bigger powder dispenser which dispenses fruit powder. And why do you need fruit powder? Well, in my medical lifetime, two problems have got very much worse. One problem is mental health, which leads to addictions, and the other is obesity, which leads to diabetes. And if you've got a powder dispenser in your pocket, sorry, I thought I had one handy that I could show you, but that's the medicine pocket dispenser, and the powder pocket dispenser is just bigger, because the medicine you only need 0.2 of a mil of the powder, but with the fruit powder you need about a mil to get a good taste. And you can use that to avoid sugary stuff, and it's sugar and fat and salt that make us obese, put our blood pressure up and cause heart attacks and strokes. So if you've got lovely fruit powder in your pocket, my favourites, vanilla and chocolate. Not chocolate, but really cocoa powder. And you can just, when you're tempted to have lollies or cake or biscuits or drinks that are full of sugar, you just whiz out and have a lovely powder taste instead. And you can break a sugar habit. Sugar is so cheap and it's so easy to use and to store and to transport, that the food and drink manufacturers put as much as possible in everything. And that's what's caused the obesity and diabetes epidemic worldwide. And you can break that habit with powder from a pocket powder medicine dispenser. Fruit powder, got a little bit of fruit sugar, which is called fructose, but that's not a problem. So that's a great way to do that. And you can use tastes to make habits and break habits. One of the things that the mental health professionals tend not to tell you, maybe they do now, but they never did when I was a medical student or a family doctor referring people to psychiatrists and psychologists, is that 60 to 65% of our life is habits. 60 to 65% of our life is habits. What is a habit? A habit is something, or everything that we do or happens in us happens as a result of electrical and chemical triggers and flows, messages. A trigger goes off and sends a message, electrical message, along the nerves, or a chemical message in your blood that makes the thing happen. When I do that, that's because an electrical message has come from my brain down the nerves of my arm to the muscles in my forearm, and that causes the movement. So why do we have habits? We have habits because our brain has got so much to do. It's so busy that it can't do everything consciously. And what it does is anything that we repeat over and over and over again, it makes the triggers and the electrical messages and the chemical messages stronger and stronger and stronger until they're almost automatic and almost unconscious. 60 to 65% of our life is habits. And the activity repeated often enough becomes a habit, whether it's helpful or harmful. And we make some helpful habits and we make some harmful habits. And some habits that were helpful at a certain stage of life, perhaps in a preschool child, become harmful in a teenager, or a habit that was helpful in a teenager becomes a problem when they're in their 20s or 30s. So because we keep changing, our life keeps changing, the world keeps changing, we have to keep making new habits and breaking old habits. So we need to know about habits. And lovely tasting fruit powder in your pocket, which you can drop on your tongue, helps you to make a habit. If you do that every time you do the new habit, you'll do the new habit much more often. You'll remember it better from the lovely taste, and you'll do it more often, and it'll become a habit. Or if you want to break a habit, you every time you think of doing the habit, you have a lovely taste, and you focus on the taste and try not to think about the habit. And when the taste starts to fade, you have another taste, and then another taste. And if you can delay doing a habit, that weakens the trigger and weakens the electrical and chemical messages. And when they're weak enough, you may be able to stop them or break them. The old timers like me will often tell you, oh, just go cold turkey. I think it was President Reagan's wife said, just say no. But that often doesn't work, and it's pretty painful, stressful, and people who go that way often relapse. So it's better to weaken and weaken and weaken the underlying triggers and electrical and chemical messages. And then when you've managed to stop doing the habit, you still carry the lovely fruit powder in your pocket, and if you're tempted to relapse, well, you just whiz it out and you block the relapse. So medicines for mental health really started in 1949 when a Melbourne psychiatrist highlighted the value of lithium in stopping bipolar disorder. All over the world there were big, very unhappy, costly, miserable hospitals full of people, most of them or many of them, suffering from mania, from bipolar disorder, mania, and there was no real successful treatment for that. And in 1949, Dr. John Cade, I think his name was, found that lithium could block mania. And then in 1952 they found Largactil, and Largactil is an antipsychotic and strong anti-anxiety medicine. And in 1957 they developed Tofranil, which is an antidepressant. And with those three medicines, all those big miserable hospitals emptied out. People could go home and take these medicines, and they'd be good enough to not need to live in a hospital. When I was a medical student in 1958, I remember with the class, with some classmates, having a tour of the Claremont Mental Hospital, and it was a miserable place. So they all emptied out, and in the next 50 years, pharmaceuticals, medicines exploded, and between 2,000 and 3,000 medicines were developed for treating health conditions, all kinds of health conditions, but also mental health conditions. That was from about 1955 to 2005. And pharmacy became the most profitable industry in the world. The most profitable industry in the world. But what happens is that if you invent a medicine, you get a monopoly of it called a patent for 20 years when nobody else can make it. You invented it, you developed it, your reward is for 20 years, you're the only one that can produce it. So they charge a lot of money for it, and they make a lot of money out of it, and having it is such a blessing that we just have to cope with the costs. But after 20 years, your monopoly or your patent no longer exists, and other people can make that medicine. And so all over the world, the best medicines that we've been using for 20 years can be made by anyone. And they're called generic medicines. And a lot of new medicines are failures. They turn out to not be as effective as what the manufacturers claim they would be, or they turn out to have bad side effects or other problems, and nobody bothers with them then. But the best medicines after 20 years are mass produced as generics. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies continue to develop new medicines so they can have a patent and a monopoly, and they say, sorry, it's 10 times as expensive, but it was very expensive to develop, and it's wonderful medicine. It's new and it's wonderful, when a lot of the time these new medicines are no better, and a few are better, but most are no better, and a lot of them are not as good as the previous medicines, which you can now buy much more cheaply as generics. I ended up using 16 medicines, and of the 16, 15 were out of patent, were generics, and one was still in patent, but it went out of patent a couple of years after I retired and stopped prescribing medicines. So what I found was that generics were usually very reliable because they'd been around for 20 years, and if there was any problems or they didn't really work, we knew that. And the ones that were very good, we knew they were very good because they'd been being used for 20 years. For instance, 3 of the most important medicines that I used were, first of all, baclofen, and baclofen's a 1960 medicine. It's a muscle relaxant, it's a tranquilizer, and it blocks craving for alcohol and for some other addictive substances, baclofen. And a wonderful medicine called naltrexone was developed in 1963, and a very good antidepressant was developed in 1991, Zoloft. So I used generics out of patent because mass produced in powder form they were very cheap, because medicine nearly all start as powder. They were originally synthesized as powder and in bulk, and with international competition between the Chinese and the Indian and the European and the American, the price is very reasonable. And powder has a number of benefits. One that I've already mentioned is that if you drop powder on your tongue and suck it and absorb it through your tongue, it gets into your bloodstream and flows to the part of your body where it's needed very quickly, within 5 minutes at first, but then you develop what's called taste conditioning, and then the medicine starts to work in seconds. As soon as you drop it on your tongue and you taste it, the taste buds at the back of your tongue taste it, then it starts to work, and it's working strongly in 5 to 10 minutes, which prevents a lot of suffering. And also nipping it in the bud weakens the mental health triggers and electrical and chemical messages, so it weakens the underlying body chemistry problem that's causing the mental health problem, and may even break it completely. Additionally, powder, you can vary the dose. It's flexible, and it's very important to get your personal best dose, because if you don't get enough of a medicine, it doesn't work very well, and if you get too much, you're likely to get side effects. And with tablets and capsules, they're much more difficult to get just your right dose. In fact, we don't even think like that, because we just assume we have to take a tablet or 2 tablets or half a tablet or 1.5 tablets, or they make it in 2 or 3 strengths, but you just can't get the exact right dose for your weight, your sensitivity, your absorption rate, and your kidney and liver functioning. So it's lower cost, is very flexible in dose, works very quickly, and you can mix 2, 3 or 4 powders together so that it has multiple benefits at once. Mental health disorders almost never occur one at a time. If you've got one mental health problem, you've usually got 1 or 2 at least other ones. If you've got ADD, ADHD, then you've often got depression and anxiety. If you've got depression, you've often got anxiety. If you've got anxiety, you've often got depression. If you've got PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, you often also have depression and anxiety. So I saw many people who'd become addicts because they had 3 problems and only one had been diagnosed and was being treated, and they were still very uncomfortable, and in the end they found that what fixed their discomfort was heroin or ecstasy or crystal meth or some street drug that was sort of a blanket thing. It just bombed them out, and everything on the streets was addictive, so they became addicts. So sometimes in my early experiences, if I diagnosed that they had 3 things, I'd give them 3 different medicines, but they tended to get them mixed up, and it was too expensive. Each separate medicine cost too much, and then I found that if I mixed 2, 3 or 4 powders together, it cost very little more than 1 powder, and it wasn't ideal because some of those medicines should be taken every 4 hours and some of them should be taken every 8 hours, but there were so many advantages that the moderate timing differences were covered. So powder which solved 2 or 3 problems at the same time was a great help to lots of people. It was a great help where it treated the mental health issue and the addiction. For instance, a large number of alcoholics became alcoholics because they had severe anxiety problems. I remember one poor kid, he was about 25, and he had terrible anxiety, and he used to drink 6 litres of wine a day. And then he'd fall asleep down by the river and wake up covered with mosquito bites. Well, a combination of low-dose naltrexone with baclofen and some mirtazapine, which is a calming antidepressant, just works wonders for some of those people. I found that there are 7 very important areas in life, and mental health was the most important. But the second most important was relationships, good relationships. If you have good relationships, it makes a total difference to your life. If you have bad relationships or no relationships, it's very damaging. You're very miserable and likely to get into trouble. Loneliness has now been proven to be as damaging as 15 cigarettes a day. So mental health, good relationship, and high endorphins chemistry. Endorphins are endogenous morphines that cut pain and mental distress and boost your immune system. Low-dose naltrexone was discovered by Dr. Bernard Bihari, who was the addiction commissioner in New York, and he's got a very slow, not very professional video about his work with low-dose naltrexone, which is well worth watching. Dr. Bernard Bihari, Bihari. What happened was that in about 1960 there were terrible heroin problems in America, and they found that heroin works through your opiate receptors, which are little landing strips on all of your cells, and the heroin lands on those little landing strips and affects has its effect on the cell. And so they thought, oh, if we can make a medicine that lands on those little landing sites, opiate receptors, on our cells, then that'll block the heroin out. And it does. In 1963 in Long Island, New York, they developed naltrexone, and it blocks the opiate receptors for 24 hours, completely blocks heroin. But unfortunately, they didn't realize that the reason we have opiate receptors is that we produce endorphins, which are opiates, and endorphins are very important. So if you block the heroin out, but you also block the endorphin effects, people felt terrible. They had terrible anxiety, they couldn't sleep, they had aches and pains, and they just wouldn't stay on the naltrexone because they made naltrexone tablets 50 milligrams, and that was much too strong. But in 1984, Dr. Bihari gave 50 milligram naltrexone tablets to some of his patients, and they wouldn't take it, wouldn't stay on them because of the side effects. So he tried them on 1 to 10 milligrams and found that 3 milligrams was the best dose of naltrexone for heroin addicts, and he called that low dose naltrexone, or LDN, and it not only blocked heroin, it blocked opioid painkillers, and 50,000 Americans a year were dying from painkillers like OxyContin and so on, and low-dose naltrexone blocked those addictive painkillers as well, and it also blocked alcohol. So low dose naltrexone, 3 milligrams of naltrexone in the evening, boosts your endorphins, your endogenous morphines, by 250 to 300%. That makes you feel much better when you wake up in the morning. It greatly reduces your craving for painkillers, addictive painkillers, heroin and alcohol. And it also strengthens your immune system, and that he discovered that cures about half of cases of cancer. One of the first people he discovered that on was the widow of a very close friend of his, and she had malignant lymphoma, which is a type of gland cancer, and she'd had it 5 years before, and it was treated with chemotherapy and radiation, and she got better, but it came back, and the chemo didn't work the second time, so she asked, somehow discussed it with Dr. Bahari, and he put her on low-dose naltrexone, and she lived for another 9 years and died of an unrelated heart attack. And then he went to a conference in Paris in 1986 and met a woman doctor there who had terminal malignant melanoma. She had skin cancer melanoma, which had spread to her brain, and he put her on low-dose naltrexone, and she lived another 18 years. So, rather interesting. Your immune system is cells, white cells, and antibodies and chemicals in every part of your body that fight infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. Not all cancers, but quite a lot. And the autoimmune diseases are things like ulcerative colitis and rheumatoid arthritis. So you want to have a strong immune system. You get a strong immune system by having a healthy lifestyle, healthy, natural, fresh foods, drink lots of water, have plenty of sunshine, fresh air and exercise, good sleep. But I take low-dose naltrexone every night of my life because one of my grandmothers and one of my first cousins died in their early 60s from bowel cancer, and another first cousin died from pancreatic cancer when he was 68. I don't want to get cancer, so I take LDN. And my two younger siblings who didn't take LDN have died. One from leukemia. My younger brother, Professor Clive Beck from Toronto University, died at 84. Well, you might say 84 is pretty good. But both our parents lived to 97, and they didn't have very good medical treatment, but because there wasn't very good medical treatment in their day, and they didn't know how to use it. They could never make appointments. Oh, no, we'll just sit and wait. So my brother, he should have lived to 100, but he died at 84 because he had a lot of stress. He was too ambitious. um, and he had family problems, and he didn't take LDN. I recommended it to him, but in Canada, in Toronto, you do what the local doctors tell you, and they didn't seem to know about LDN. And my sister tried LDN, but she was allergic to it. She just couldn't tolerate it. A very small percentage of people can't even tolerate 1 milligram, but the great majority of people can tolerate 3 or 4.5 milligrams with great benefit to their health. We need a good home in a good location. One of the really sad things that I saw was homeless people. Their mental health problems had led to problems that led to homelessness, and that was a disaster. And a good education. And a lot of people with mental health problems didn't get a good education. One year I treated 700 heroin addicts, and a third of them had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And what I'd found was that most of them came from poorer families, often because their mother or their father had ADD, and that made the family poor. And when they were teenagers, their family lived in the wrong end of town, and there weren't, and the 3 medicines for ADD were all addictive: dexamphetamine, Ritalin, and Adderall, all addictive. So only specialists could prescribe them. So their family doctor couldn't prescribe the treatment for ADD, and they didn't have much contact with the top end of town where all the specialists were, and they didn't have enough money. At that time, not even our children's hospital had an ADD clinic, so they ended up on the streets getting relief either from uppers like crystal meth, ice, ecstasy, or heroin. And that was a disaster, because our lawmakers in their wisdom had decreed that not even special doctors could prescribe these addictive medicines for ADD if the person was an addict. So I saw these people who were heroin addicts because they didn't get the proper treatment for their ADD. Their ADD wasn't diagnosed and wasn't treated. They their ADD wasn't diagnosed, wasn't treated, and they'd become addicts. And I had one young man who had ADD and was an addict, who hung himself when he found he couldn't get the treatment. He was a 23-year-old IT worker, very smart kid working in IT, but somewhat disturbed, and he'd been taking crystal meth. And he came to me, and I checked him out, and I said, well, you've got ADD. That's your problem. But we got a problem. No use me sending you to see a psychiatrist, because they're not allowed to prescribe the addictive treatments for ADD, because you're an addict. But I said, there's one medicine which I'm allowed as a family doctor to prescribe because it's not addictive. I've never prescribed it before, but I think you should try it. And that was modafinil. So I gave him modafinil, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. He stopped taking his illegal stimulants, and his ADD was controlled. But unfortunately, he had lost his job because he became too erratic, and he just couldn't afford modafinil in Australia. 30 100 milligram tablets cost him $143, and because he was 125 kilos, he needed to take 3 tablets every morning. So 30 tablets lasted him 10 days. So he needed $14.30 a day to stay on modafinil, which worked so well for him. And he managed to borrow or steal $143 to buy the first 30, but after that he couldn't get any more. And he got so upset about it all that he hung himself. His flatmate told me that he tried to hang himself from a hook on the back of his bedroom door, but the hook broke because he weighed 125 kilos. So a few days later he went down by the river and hung himself from a tree. And then I found I could buy modafinil from India, double strength 200 milligram tablets, for 50 cents each. So for 75 cents he could get 300 milligrams. And so after that I used to bring the tablets in from India for these people. It's legal to import medicines into Australia if they're legal in Australia, but not more than 3 months at a time. Well, I think I need to do some other things now, so thank you very much for watching. If you've got any comments, questions or criticisms, please send them to me through the platform that you watch this live streaming, or go to my website smilefixit.com, and you'll find an email address, and email me with your comments, questions or criticisms, and I always respond to emails. Today is Wednesday. I'll be back again Friday at 7 p.m. Perth time, and Sunday 9 a.m. Perth time. I'm so busy on some things to do with my whole program that I have had to stop doing Saturday evenings. Right. Thank you. Bye.